Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of WION Live Broadcast. I'm Simon Marks in Washington, D.C. And let's start with the day's top headlines. NATO foreign ministers are meeting in Brussels for a two-day summit that will focus on providing more military and economic aid to Ukraine. Pope Francis has kissed a battered Ukrainian flag that was brought to him from the Ukrainian city of Bucha. He's called again for an end to the war. The UN General Assembly will vote on suspending Russia from the UN Human Rights Council as punishment for its invasion of Ukraine. A key member of Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's Yamina party says she is quitting his coalition government in a surprise move that leaves him without a parliamentary majority. And a military court in Burkina Faso has given a life prison sentence to the country's exiled former president for his role in the 1987 assassination of his predecessor. We begin today in Brussels, where the foreign ministers of NATO member states are gathering for a two-day summit. NATO's Secretary General says the meeting is an important milestone, not merely for Europe, but for global security as well. The foreign ministers have started arriving at the venue. These are live visuals coming into us from Brussels. The summit will, of course, address Vladimir Putin's invasion and the brutal killings in Bucha, just outside Kiev, that were revealed to the world over the weekend. The participating nations will also extend fresh support to Ukraine with anti-tank weapons, air defense systems and other equipment, as well as increased humanitarian assistance and financial aid. The NATO foreign ministers will be joined by their counterparts from Ukraine, Finland, Sweden, Georgia and the European Union, and partners from the Asia-Pacific region, Australia, Japan, New Zealand and South Korea. And their staff arrive for this all-important NATO summit, the first really substantial high-level event since over the weekend those searing images were revealed from Bucha, showing, according to the Ukrainian government, evidence of war crimes that have been committed. Even President Zelensky has called it genocide on the part of Russian troops in the country. And President Zelensky, of course, gave that impassioned speech on Tuesday to the United Nations Security Council, saying that the United Nations, in essence, might might as well shut down if it is unable to guarantee peace and security in countries like Ukraine. So an opportunity for NATO foreign ministers over the next 2 days to consider their next moves in the Ukraine crisis. And we know that there are fresh sanctions that are going to be unveiled in the United States and also across Europe within the course of the next few hours.
Allies have stepped up their support. I also expect that ministers, when they meet today and tomorrow, will discuss how we can further support Ukraine. Allies are providing both anti-tank, anti-air or air defense systems, but also different kinds of advanced weapon systems, and also both light and heavier weapon systems to Ukraine.
Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg there, calling this the crucial phase of the war and claiming that Russian forces are going to refocus their operations, pushing further in eastern and southern Ukraine in the coming weeks. NATO says it expects Vladimir Putin to try and take the entire Donbass region in eastern Ukraine in the coming weeks and then try to create a land corridor in order to connect it with the Crimean Peninsula that, of course, Russia annexed from Ukraine back in 2014. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg will address a joint press conference at the end of today's meeting. Joining us now live from New York is WION's correspondent Susan Teherani. Susan, we know that there are more sanctions in the pipeline that could be unveiled today by the Biden administration and its European allies and partners. What are we expecting in that sanctions package?
Well, this new sanctions package, Simon, is expected to ban all new investment in Russia, increase sanction on financial institutions and also state-owned enterprises in the country as well. Officials familiar with the sanction package say that family members of Vladimir Putin will also be sanctioned, possibly his two eldest children, his daughters as well. However, this package also comes at a time when Jake Sullivan admitted that sanctions alone will probably not deter Vladimir Putin from moving forward in Ukraine. So that's a side conversation that's happening here in the United States, not only on Capitol Hill, but also in the media as well. We also know that sanctions will also, there may be, there's some eyeing of sanctions on the Sberbank, Russia's largest financial institution, Alfa Bank, another large lender that officials are saying that perhaps will be announced as well, stopping short of Russia's energy sector. Again, something that Republicans here are pushing back on, saying that that is the sector that the Biden administration really has to focus on, the Biden administration and its allies, for Vladimir Putin to really feel the pinch.
And Susan, while all eyes are going to be focused on that NATO summit over the next couple of days and on NATO headquarters in Brussels, there was an absolutely astonishing event in the House of Representatives yesterday when a non-binding resolution simply expressing US support for NATO was brought up for a vote, and 63 Republicans voted against it, voted against the idea of expressing support for NATO. What is going on within the Republican Party?
Yeah, 1/3 of House Republicans, almost, if you think about it. And I think it really, you know, is a snapshot of what we're going through right now. And these people, these politicians, they're going into midterm elections. And I think it's a snapshot of what the country is thinking right now. They're thinking of their constituents on the one hand. On the other hand, you really see these isolationist tendencies that still are withering from during the Trump administration, and President Trump's allies really on Capitol Hill that continue to really not favor NATO and America's involvement on the world stage. And I think you see this with even resolutions like this, albeit non-binding. It really paints a clear picture. On the one hand, you have groups like the Squad, which you compare to 63 Republicans on this side that are maybe,
Well, we seem to have lost Susan Tehrani live there from the streets of New York, but I think we got the gist of what she was saying. She was talking there about the country and the world getting a snapshot of where Republicans in Congress stand on the issue of NATO and on the issue of US foreign policy more broadly. And we got a further snapshot of all of that yesterday when top Pentagon officials testified before the House Armed Services Committee. Their testimony was about events in Ukraine, of course, but also about the Biden administration's request for $770 billion to budget for the Defense Department next year. And things quickly got heated when Republican lawmaker Matt Gaetz of Florida got his chance to question Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Take a look.
That is so disgraceful that you would sit here and conflate your failures with the failures of the uniformed service members. You guys said that Russia would overrun Ukraine in 36 days. You said that the Taliban would be kept at bay for months. You totally blew those calls. And maybe we would be better at them if the National Defense University actually worked a little more on strategy and a little less on wokeism.
Has it occurred to you that Russia has not overrun Ukraine because of what we've done and our allies have done?
But that was baked into your flawed assessment. That was baked into your flawed assessment. And so I saw that the Obama administration tried to destroy our military by starving it of resources, and it seems the Biden administration is trying to destroy our military by force-feeding it wokeism. I yield back.
Absolutely amazing stuff. With lawmakers ramping up attempts to seek evidence regarding last year's January the 6th siege on the US Capitol by Donald Trump supporters, the latest person to testify in the Capitol riot probe is the former US president's daughter, Ivanka. The 40-year-old businesswoman, who was also a senior advisor to her father, had been asked to appear voluntarily after the committee investigating the January the 6th events claimed it had evidence that Ivanka Trump had urged her father to call his supporters off after they stormed the congressional building. In January, committee chair Benny Thompson claimed of Ivanka Trump that testimony obtained by the committee indicates that members of the White House staff requested your assistance on multiple occasions to intervene in an attempt to persuade President Trump to address the ongoing lawlessness. The former president's daughter is one of more than 800 witnesses that the committee has interviewed so far. She testified for about 8 hours yesterday, and according to committee members, she answered questions and did not assert any privileges or invoke the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination. That sets her apart from some other senior figures within the Trump administration who have sought to avoid the committee. Ivanka Trump's testimony comes less than a week after her husband, Jared Kushner, testified to the committee in a separate virtual meeting. That lasted more than 6 hours. Some members of the panel say Ivanka Trump's testimony was helpful because she was with her father at the White House on the day of the uprising. The 9-member panel is using these interviews to compile a comprehensive record. It will be released in the coming few months and could lead to a criminal referral against her father, the former president.
Message to everyone who's been affected by Hurricane Laura.
A month after controversy broke out in India over female students not being allowed to wear the hijab in educational institutions, Al-Qaeda's elusive leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, has waded into the controversy. He's released a video, it's the first since November, where he said that the controversy has exposed the reality of India. In the 8-minute statement, al-Zawahiri hails Muskan Khan. She's a student in the Indian state of Karnataka, who became famous for protesting against the hijab ban back in February. A video of her facing off against a mob of students and shouting back defiant slogans went viral. Al-Zawahiri is seen reciting a poem he composed praising Khan. He also attacked countries that have banned the hijab, along with Pakistan and Bangladesh, whom he accused of being allies of the West. This video shows that al-Zawahiri, who is one of the most wanted terrorists in the world, is not only alive, but remains actively engaged with current events. The Peruvian President Pedro Castillo has called off a curfew in the capital Lima after a widespread display of anger and defiance.
Estamos trasladándonos al despacho para rubricar y dejar sin efecto esta medida de inamovilidad, y corresponde en este momento hacer también algunos anuncios importantes que estamos a la espera, que lo vamos a hacer en conjunto con el Congreso de la República. Muchas gracias. Muy buenas tardes.
Castillo issued a sudden curfew mandate minutes before midnight on Monday, ordering residents of Lima to stay at home. This in an attempt to curb nationwide protests over surging prices. But the curfew triggered a fresh crisis for the Castillo administration, with thousands of people taking to the streets to defy it. He then cut the curfew short. Opposition lawmakers decried the emergency measure as illegal.
Nos quitan la libertad y encima nos reprimen. Un gobierno delincuente, un gobierno lleno de corrupción.
Hundreds of protesters outside Congress and in other parts of the capital celebrated news of the curfew's end. The curfew led to a fresh crisis for the Castillo administration just days after he survived an impeachment trial. Emerging economies like Peru have been affected by heavy sanctions imposed by the West on Russia since it has cut the supply of oil and fertilizers to the country. Even before the start of the war, Peru was battling high inflation, and the conflict has only accelerated the surge in prices of fuel, food and other essentials. At nearly 1.5%, Peru's inflation in March was the highest for 26 years. As inflation mounted, people took to the streets to express their concern and displeasure with a seemingly never-ending array of issues. Castillo's popularity is waning, and his credibility as president is increasingly being called into question. In an effort to help the millions of people who have been displaced by the war in Ukraine, 2 Harvard University students have now created a website that serves as a platform for refugees seeking temporary shelter in various parts of the world to connect with volunteers.
Millions have fled Ukraine in quest of safety. Over 4 million people. Out of these, as of March 30th, some 2.3 million people had fled to neighbouring Poland. While some had family and friends in Europe, others had to settle in camps with volunteers who had opened their doors for them. The point is, it has been a wrenching process. And taking note of this, 2 Harvard University students, Marco Berstein and Avi Schiffman, have now set up a website to help the millions displaced and in search for temporary shelter.
Our goals when creating this website were to make it as intuitive and secure as possible. First, on the ease of use side of things, we make sure that refugees can immediately type in a location and start seeing results. Because if they are fleeing from danger or they're in an emergency situation, we want to make that as efficient as possible. For our hosts, we provide a lot of opportunities for them to add details to their listings, labels like what languages they speak, to help them find the best match.
With this also came the task of having in place security checks. After all, how much can you gauge about someone just through interaction on a website?
We have a detailed reporting system as well where we can remove inappropriate listings. We're working with aid organizations to get verified listings onto the platform as well. And we have anti-scraping mechanisms to prevent any bad actors from trying to misuse the website.
The hope is that UkraineTakesShelter.com will help displaced and disoriented Ukrainian refugees connect with people willing to help them, give them an idea of prospective places and possible offers to take them in. Till now, some 18,000 hosts have signed up to help. Not a bad start at all. Since the start of the invasion on the 24th of February, images coming out of Ukraine, those of destroyed homes, displaced families, injured individuals, scared mothers with little children too young to understand what is happening, have stirred global outreach. Students, rights organizations and friends and relatives of the affected Ukrainians are doing their bit to spread the word and get them the help they require at this tumultuous time. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now, Japan already has robots to carry out the simplest of tasks at the country's factory, and some aim to robotize subtle operations like delivering coffee or moving small metal pieces. But now the Japanese have developed a robot that can peel bananas. The problem is it has a success rate of only 57%. The other 43% might get you served with a banana split or perhaps even a smoothie. Finally today, former US President Barack Obama was back in the White House yesterday for the first time since he left office. We leave you with the highlights of an event celebrating the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, that brought the former president face-to-face with today's leader in Washington. Thanks for watching WION Live broadcast. I'll see you again soon, right here on WION World is One.
We are done. After almost a century of trying, today, after over a year of debate, today, after all the votes have been tallied, health insurance reform becomes law in the United States of America. Vice President Biden, Vice President, that was a joke. That was all set up. We didn't get everything we wanted. That wasn't a reason not to do it. If you can get millions of people health coverage and better protection, it is, to quote a famous American, a pretty big deal. That's what it is. But there were gaps to be filled.